Buenas tardes, estimados señores y señoras. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to make remarks about the European business views on the energy transition and industrial competitiveness in Europe. I'm sorry that I cannot be in Madrid with you today, but your conference unfortunately happens precisely at the moment of our board meeting. Today I will try to focus on three things: the energy crisis, the need to secure energy supplies for the energy transition, and the need to bring down prices for consumers. Let me start with the background for our discussions on energy transition and industrial competitiveness. The dramatic rises in energy prices, which we saw over the past 2 years, have been impacting millions of European households and businesses. Many European businesses have been forced to reduce their industrial production or even had to stop it completely. For instance, in the ammonia sector, the production dropped by around 25%. Methanol output dropped by 23% and urea by almost 20%. This, of course, had repercussions not just in the selected sectors, but across the whole industrial value chains. While we managed to avoid the worst possible scenario of large-scale disruptions of energy supplies, also thanks to the reduction of gas demand from industry, the energy prices were and are still high. This morning, the European gas prices are twice as high as on the same day 5 years ago. Unfortunately, the high energy prices is not just an issue of the past and the present, but it's also an issue of the future. We don't expect that prices will go back to the pre-war levels at least until 2027. And more importantly, this translates into companies' business decisions. According to EIB, around 60% of European companies cite rising energy costs as a major barrier to long-term investment in the EU. This is just the background for the challenges we are facing with the energy transition in the European Union. Our success in transitioning will depend on one question: will we be able to supply of the required volumes of clean energy into the system within the envisaged timeframes? Following the recent revision of the EU ETS, European industry will face a continued increase of carbon costs. This either means that the carbon costs will keep on increasing, especially relative to our main competitors, and could force some to shut down, or we find solutions to switch to decarbonized alternatives as soon as possible. The increase of carbon cost will be even more pronounced with the phase-out of the free allowances for European industry under EU ETS. However, to make that switch to decarbonized energy, greener energy has to be available in the required volumes and at competitive prices. Otherwise, there will be an economic signal to decarbonized energy that isn't available. This is why we will need a massive increase in the supplies of renewable and low-carbon energy sources at affordable prices. If we take renewable hydrogen as an example, the International Energy Agency estimates that only around 4% of announced green hydrogen projects actually manage to reach a final investment decision. This is hugely problematic. We need a coherent regulatory framework to incentivize the investments needed in electricity generation and the much needed deployment of energy infrastructures like grids, chargers and CCS technology. Of course, permitting is key here. Provisions in the Net Zero Industry Act are welcome, but this should apply not just to clean tech projects, but many other individual areas across the supply chains where investments are needed. It should apply to the whole value chains. At the same time, we need to keep driving down the energy prices for consumers. EU companies are facing the prospect of long-term energy price rises well above major competitors. As already mentioned, wholesale gas prices in Europe are not expected to come down to pre-war levels until 2027. The electricity market design reform will help a bit to have more long-term contracts in the system and therefore allow more companies to hedge against high electricity prices. But this is not a silver bullet. We need to address the structural cost differential with third countries. World Bank data suggests that in 2024 and 2025, EU gas prices will remain 3 to 4 times more expensive than those of the US. If the cost differential is not addressed, aside from the industrial curtailments and shutdowns already observed in last years, it will have serious consequences for the long-standing competitiveness of European companies and the EU global strengths. In the meantime, international competition to attract investments has been increasing. At the end of 2022, the US Inflation Reduction Act was put forward. This big American public investment plan, aiming at greening the US economy, risks pulling investments and production away from Europe, on top of the push factors we already have, like the high energy cost or regulatory overburden. As a result, 90% of Business Europe members say Europe is less attractive as business location than 3 years ago. We have already seen big European companies moving partially away from Europe. For instance, BASF decided to invest 10 billion euros by 2030 in China, while it is shutting down sections of its flagship facility in Ludwigshafen in Germany. This is why, for the Green Deal to become a real growth strategy, it will need to be flanked by an industrial strategy with a focus on tackling high energy prices and speeding up permitting procedures. Recent clean transition dialogues organized by the European Commission have shown that not all energy-intensive sectors see a business case for their transformation under the current circumstances. Our leadership on the global scale, especially in the field of green transition, depends on successful and strong companies based in Europe. I'm happy I could contribute to the debate, also virtually, and I wish you fruitful discussions. Thank you so much y muchas gracias por su atención.